All right, welcome back to Q2 Week 7 Walk This Way. This is actually day 4 of our series for this week. First day, we set up the mesh. Second day, we made sure that the mesh is going to work better, but we forgot to do his belly. So we ended up doing that on day 3. On day 3, we added another loop in the belly, and then we added all the bones. And we watched that gorilla video on XYZ rotation, talked about how important it is to make sure that we build our bones so that they rotate and move. Their primary form of rotation is on the Z-axis, which is the final one calculated. So after we rotated everything and we reset the stretch, inverted the widths, we rebuilt and renamed the nubs and linked the hierarchy together. So today we are going to get you moving, get your body moving. Actually, we're not going to get your body moving. We're going to get your skeleton moving. Because what we need to do, well, we already did bone naming. So we talked about all that. Then next, we need to do our range of motion animation. Okay, so we're going to talk about how we do a bunch of animation for a bunch of different keys. And then we're actually going to do the entire left side. And then make sure the skinning is ready to go. Alright, so we left off here, and this is a good place to leave off. Once again, the naming setup, we are already done. Everything starts with a B. So everything starts with a B, our head nub, and everything is starting with a B. Our mesh should start with a P, which it is, but it's all frozen right now. So what we're going to do today is we're actually going to start moving and creating a huge animation, much bigger than anything we've done so far this year. Much smaller than large-scale animations, but still, what we need to do is we need to come up with a skinning animation. A skinning animation basically runs a skeleton through its different poses so that as you're skinning, you can scrub through and modify this. Modify the object so that you can actually see how the skin is deforming as the bones move through their range of motion. Okay, so first things first, we need to take the entire skeleton, which we should be able to double click on the root, which is right here, and get all of the pieces. Now I've got 25 objects selected, which is all of my pieces. Alright, and the first thing I'm going to do is set a keyframe at the very beginning. So go to set key and set a keyframe. Now we're going to start at the bottom and work our way up. And we're going to start all the way at the very bottom. And we're going to start with the left side. So, once again, we're going to be moving. Now this time we're actually going to use auto key since we're going to be doing a lot of motion. We're going to work in 20 frame segments. Okay, and usually when I work in 20 frame segments, I'm going to go down to time configuration. I'm going to work in a 200 frame window. So frame length will be 200. Hit enter, and then you can see the timeline has changed. I need to click OK, otherwise it won't actually change. So so now I'm at. So once again, I am sick. I apologize for that, but you know it is what it is. So at frame 0, I set a keyframe for all 25 objects. Okay, so we have a base setup for all 25 set bones. Now I'm going to start at the bottom, and I'm going to do 20 frame sections. Okay, 20 frame sections where I will actually move a piece of the skeleton and then move another piece to where it's back. And then I'll keep doing that as we go until I've got an animation that's set up for the entire object. Okay, my computer's starting to fall down here. I need to reset it. Okay, good. So let's get going. So under E for rotation, we want to make sure we're in local rotation. Everything should have a keyframe at the beginning that we can always copy over or at least hold. So from the very beginning, we're never going to really animate these nubs, so we can ignore those. However, every 20 frames, we're going to want to go to a position and then come back in 20 frames. So from 0 to 20, I'm going to move my toe down. Now it doesn't have to go crazy down, but you should make it move down a little more than you probably ever would naturally. So I'm going to move that. Now when I do this in set key, nothing happens, right? However, if I do it in auto key and I move it down, let's say 40, you should have angle snapped on too, by the way, 40 degrees. Now it actually saves it, but once it hits that, it stops. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to come back for frame 40. So I want to move down to 20, frame 20 would come back for 40. All right, so I'm going to take this keyframe, hold shift, and drag it to 40. Excuse me. Down and up. Great. Now I'm going to have it go all the way up. So I could actually save some frames and drag this out to 60. Okay, and at frame 40, you'll see that just makes it come back really slow. At frame 40, I'm going to move it up 75 degrees. So there it goes all the way down to there, up to 75 degrees, which is more than you'll probably ever naturally bend your toes. And then it comes back to 60. Okay, we could have had it come back to 0 first, but this works fine. Basically, what we want to do is check for crashing, and we'll talk more about that as we get into the skinning portion of the next tomorrow. Today we're just doing the animation. Great. Now, at frame 60, I'm going to move to my next object, which is this. Now, this bone has not moved yet. So if I create a keyframe, and I can always hit K and set a keyframe, that means it will not move until there, because I've said it stays put there, and it stays put there. From here, though, if I do another animation, let's say I can do another keyframe at 100, go back to 80, and then let's say my ankle, I'm going to bend my ankle down like that by 35 degrees. Auto key set, so now my toe's done moving, my ankle moves, and back up. And now I'm going to do 140, set a keyframe because it's back to 0. Nothing, it shouldn't move. I go to 120 and move it up, about as high as I think could naturally happen. That's 50 degrees. So now I've got that. Great. Moving on up. The leg, the knee, actually. So the knee joint, once again, at 140, I'm going to set a keyframe. That way it will not move until then. If you do not set this keyframe every time you hit a new bone, you're going to have problems where the whole thing starts moving. And what you want is you want to isolate each individual joint. So as you do your skinning, you can watch just that one joint, see how it behaves, and then make sure that you adjust your skinning accordingly. Excuse me. Okay, so from here, from 140 to 180, we want it to come right back to where it was. So I'm going to set another keyframe. At 160, I'm going to bend the knee backwards to about 135 degrees. Alright? Auto key has done my work for me. So it comes back, then it comes forward. Great. Now you see I've reached the end of my timeline, so I'm going to have to move. So I'm going to open up my time configuration and set my timeline to start at 180. My length to be 200. And then hit OK. So 180 is where I stopped, which is where my knee came back. So now that's where my thigh is going to start. Now my thigh is a ball joint, so we're going to have to move it a lot. And because it deals with a crotch, we're going to have to not just move it, but we're also going to have to move the other leg for a change as well. So I'm actually going to highlight both of these legs, both of these bottom legs, and I'm going to set a key. So they will be able to start here. Now, from 180 to 200 they'll move, so from 200 to 220 we'll go ahead and set a key at 220, go back to 200. Now since I have both of them selected, I should be able to rotate them. I actually want them to rotate opposite directions. So for this, for the left, I think I'm going to move it up like this, because we want to be able to have that come forward and look okay. So that's set, and it should move back. So up and back. Now, you can move it back as well, although realistically your leg doesn't move back. If you want to practice it, go ahead and stand up and give it a shot. Pause the video. I dare you. I absolutely dare you. In the middle of class, or hopefully you might be doing this at home, whatever. Stand up and see how far you can actually move your leg back without moving your hips. it's almost impossible to move it more than 5 to 10 degrees, because even if you're doing a split, what's happening is your front leg is the leg that's moving forward is extremely flexible and moving, doing 90% of the work. The hips are actually rotating, and your spine is doing the rest of the work to get your other leg back. So it's kind of hard to explain, but you're just going to have to trust me on it. You think you can move your leg back, but you can't. Anyway, so we move it forward, back to 220. Now at 240, we're going to do a split. So at 260, I want to come back to natural for both legs once again. Set a key at 260, and at 240, I'm going to look at both of this bone. I'll move it out. Let's say, what do we got there? 80 degrees. I'm going to do the same thing for the other leg. 80 degrees. There. Now, so he does the splits like that. All right. The reason we're doing that is so that we can see how the deformation is going to happen in the crotch. Now, we don't have a whole lot of vertices down here, so we're not going to be dealing with it nearly as much as we would if we had an actual character. But it's still sort of a good practice to get that going. All right, great. So now from 260 to 280, we are done with our legs. Now we can start on our spine. Now I can actually move our entire spine by clicking each bone together, because realistically, your spine bone moves very little. We're going to set a keyframe right here. Let's see as they come back together at 260. Actually, I should probably take that and move it back to 260, because that's where they come together. Now our spine is going to go from 260 to 300. Put a keyframe at 300. And at 280, I'm going to bend them down. Now notice, I only bend them down a few degrees because every single one of these spine bones are bending. All of them are. So I'm not going to bend it a whole lot. So like 30 degrees is pretty good. Each bone is bending 30 degrees. Okay, so our hips stay the same, and our torso is bending. Okay, 30 degrees each. So that should come down and come back up. If you want to, we can take this. We still have all the same bones. Hold Shift, drag it out to 340, go to 320, and you can do a little side-to-side action, a little like this, to our side bends. Now, realistically, we don't bend much this way. Our skeletons are not made to do this. They just don't bend well that direction. Most of it is done with our clavicles and our shoulders, and then we make it look like it's bending more than it really is. So don't get too bent out of shape. Ha ha ha, pun intended. Yeah, thank you. It's so good. So don't get too bent out of shape about that. We're going to move on from there. Now let's keep going up the hierarchy. We could, from 340 to 380, that's basically done. Now let's look at the head. The head and the clavicles are next. We could do the head. Let's go ahead and do the head as we go. So from 340, let's go ahead and create a keyframe here, because I think that's where we stop. Keyframe at 340. That way nothing moves until we hit there. Now 340 to 380. I'm going to set a key. 360. I'm going to move it. I'm going to turn the head about 90 degrees to the left, which is pretty far. It's a little bit farther than you probably can naturally. So that's good. And now we've reached the end of our current frame. Alright, so let's see. Next, we're going to click on that. Now our start time is going to be 380, and we're going to go 200 frames. Alright, okay, there we go. So we just stopped with our neck coming back. Now let's go ahead and go out to, from 380 to 400, we're going to look up. So we're going to go to 420, set a keyframe, go back to 400, and I'm going to look up like that. Alright, so now our little skeleton should look up and come back. Now, as long as we're looking okay when we rotate left, we don't necessarily have to go right. If you want to, you can. There's nothing wrong with that. And then same thing with down. We're going to have some crashing with our chin into our chest, and I'm not too worried about it because, once again, this is a very simple animation. Alright, from 420, I'm going to grab my clav. Alright, left clav selected. Good. Set a keyframe. Now, the clavicle doesn't move a whole lot, but it does a lot because what it actually does is move our shoulders around. So I'm going to go from 420 to 460, set a keyframe, move back to 440, and I'm going to move that up a little bit. Maybe 15 degrees. Not a whole lot. Our clavs actually don't move much. They don't move down hardly at all. They do move up, and they move forward. So I'm going to go to 500, set a keyframe, go to 480, and move it forward a little bit. Alright, great. So now my clav moves up. You can see this is one of those gimbal lock situations where it moves up, then it moves forward, then it moves back. See how as it moves up it sort of rotates a little bit? Not exactly the way I want it to. Alright. Cool. Alright, so 500. At 500, we are going to start moving the arm, our up arm. Once again, create a keyframe. At 500, go to 540, create another keyframe. Now our arm is actually going to take up a lot of our space because it does do a lot. Usually when you move your arm up, like when you put your arm up over your head straight up, it's actually got to rotate. And your clavicle's doing a lot of the work there. So you'll notice that the arm doesn't actually bend a whole lot. So we're only going to move this up, let's say 40 degrees. Because with the clav moving the rest of the way, did I move that in the wrong time? I did. It's supposed to be at 520. 520, I'm moving it up to about 40, 45 degrees. The clav does the rest of the work, so we'll only move that up about that far. Come back down to 540. Then 580, I'm going to create a keyframe, and this time I'm going to move it down at 560. Alright, 560. Alright, so now at 500 it goes up, 540 comes back, 560 it goes down, and 580. So 500 actually stays. At 520 it goes up, 40 is back to neutral, and then 60 is down, 580 we're back to neutral. Need more frames. Alright, start time 580. Length 200. You can do more frames if you want. I like 200 because if you start getting really tight, it's hard to see what you're doing. Alright, so we've set that there. We need to move it forward. So 600 will move forward, and 620 will set back to where we were. So go ahead and hit the set key button at 600 or 620, and then go back to 600. And move your arms forward. Once again, the clav will do some of the work here. It'll actually move the arm forward. So that's okay. But once again, we're trying to isolate each joint individually and make it look as good as we can on its own. Alright, great. Now, you'll notice that your arm, your arm itself, your shoulder does roll, although we won't be doing that today. We'll sort of avoid that for today because we have a separate system called roll bones that we use for that. Alright, next we've got, from there we actually can start moving the elbow. So grab the elbow, or our forearm joint, go ahead and set a key at 620, and then set a key at 660, then go back to 640, and this is easy, we just bend it in. It's that simple. That's the only way that one bends. If it bends any other way, things have gone terribly wrong. So we're at 660 frames. And that's it. The wrist would twist on its own. This bone does not really want once again, it's a roll bone situation where it moves. So that's basically all of our animation. So we go all the way to 660. Alright, so let's go back to our time configuration. Our start time is going to be 0. Our end time is 660. Click OK. And now we should be able to watch the entire animation. Super quick. Alright, so hitting play, starts with a toe, goes to the heel, and nothing should be moving except for what we said. Then we kick up, we spread our legs out, bend over, bend sideways, move our head left, move our head up, move our calves up and forward, move our arm up, forward, and our elbow, and that's that. And then it starts over again. And that's it. That's our animation. Now, it probably took you a while to do all this because it can be confusing, especially if you have things moving. Now, if things are starting to move, and they shouldn't, it all comes down to you making sure that you added a keyframe at the very beginning when you started working with a bone. If things aren't moving individually, it's because you haven't set a keyframe as soon as the animation, you get to the animation where it starts. Okay, so that is it. If you highlight everything, you can see all the different animation going on. It should be every 20 frames you've got some action going, and that should be it. Alright, so today, let's see, F5. Today was day 4. We already did some naming stuff, so we didn't have to do that today because we did it yesterday. We went through and did our range of motion animation on all of our pieces. And that's basically it. So you should be in good shape for day 5. And I hope everything's going well. Tomorrow we're going to start doing the skinning on the object. Alright? So thanks for sticking with us. We'll see you tomorrow for day 5, skinning.